Wei Wuxian wanted to wash his face to have gaze upon the face of his body's owner after death, but there wasn't any water in the room, not even for drinking or washing. The only basin-like container was probably, he suspected, for lavatory purposes instead of cleansing. He pushed the door, but it was fastened with a latch, probably to prevent him from wandering outside. None of these things made him feel the joy of reincarnation at all. He figured that he might as well sit in the lotus position and get used to his new home. Time flew by and the day had passed. When he opened his eyes, sunlight seeped inside from the gaps of the door and windows. Although he could stand up and walk around, he still felt lightheaded. Wei Wuxian was puzzled. Moshia's amount of spiritual powers are insignificant enough to be ignored. So there shouldn't be a reason as to why I can't control this body properly. Why doesn't it work? Then a noise came from his stomach, and he realized that this wasn't related to his spiritual powers at all. In fact, it was because this body had not practiced Inadiya and felt hunger. If he didn't scavenge for food, he might become the first villainous ghoul who starved to death upon arrival. Wei Wuxian lifted his foot and was about to kick the door open, when suddenly the sound of approaching footsteps appeared. Someone stomped on the door and grunted, "It's mealtime!" Nonetheless, there was no indication of the door being opened. Wei Wuxian lowered his head and saw a miniature door on the bottom of this one opening, with a small bowl set in front of it. The servant outside shouted again, "Chop, chop! What are you waiting for? Take the bowl out if you are finished." The door was slightly smaller than the kind for dogs to crawl through. It didn't allow the passage for humans, but bowls could be easily taken inside. There were 2 dishes and 1 serving of rice, which looked quite unpleasant. Wei Wuxian played with the pair of chopsticks that were stuck into the rice, feeling quite bitter. The Yiling patriarch had just returned to the mortal world, but the first thing he came upon was a kick and a scolding, not to mention the leftovers that served as his welcoming meal. Where were the blood and gore, the ruthless slaughter, the absolute destruction? Who would believe him? He was like the tiger in a flat land, a dragon in shallow water, the phoenix without feathers, losing his advantage and belittled by those weaker than him. Then the servant outside spoke again, but with laughter this time. "Adil, come here!" The sweet voice of a girl answered from a distance. "Atong, are you delivering the mail to the one in there again?" Atong clicked his tongue. "Why else would I come to this ominous courtyard?" Ajang's voice sounded closer, as if she was in front of the door. "You just deliver 1 meal a day, and nobody cares if you're lazy. This is such an idle task, yet you think it's ominous? Look at me. I'm busy to the point that I can't even go outside to play." Atong complained. "Delivering his mail is not the only task I do. How can you dare to go outside these days with so many walking corpses out there? Everyone's locking themselves in their houses." Wei Wuxian squatted by the door and listened while eating. It appeared to be that ever since a while ago, the Mo village hadn't been peaceful. Walking corpses, like their name, were dead people who could move, a type of low-level altered corpse. Unless the deceased person held strong resentment, they were usually dull-eyed or sluggish. They weren't overly dangerous, but they were enough to alarm the average person, especially their vomit-inducing stench. However, to Wei Wuxian, they were the most obeying puppets. When he heard them being mentioned, he even felt a sense of familiarity. Tong seems to be making a face. "If you want to go outside, you'll have to take me so that I can protect you." Ardeng replied, "You? Protect me? Stop bragging. Are you sure you can defeat those things?" Tong said bitterly, "If I can't defeat them, other people can't either." Ardeng laughed. "How do you know other people can't defeat them?" "Let me tell you, today some cultivators came to my village. I heard that they're from a very prominent clan. The madam is talking to them in the main hall, and everyone in town is watching. Can't you hear the noise? I don't have time to play around with you. They might give me some more work afterwards." Wei Wuxian listened attentively. Sure enough, the faint bustling sounds of people came from the east. He pondered for a moment, stood up, and kicked the door. It cracked with a clank. At the moment, the two servants, Ardeng and Tong, were flirting with each other and screamed when the door suddenly flung open. Wei Wuxian threw away his bowl and walked outside, flinching from the glare of the sunlight. He brought his hand to the tip of his brow and closed his eyes for a moment. Just now, Tong screamed even louder than Ardeng. But as he took a closer look and realized that it was Mo Xuanyu, the person whom everyone could humiliate, his courage came back to him. He figured that he probably lost face in front of Ardeng and wanted to make up for it. So he jumped over and waved his hands like he was approaching a dog. "Shoo, shoo! Go away! Why did you come out?" Tong treated him even worse than he treated a beggar or a fly. Most of the time, all of the servants of the Mo family treated Mo Xuanyu like this because he never resisted. Wei Wuxian gave Tong a light kick, knocking him over, and laughed. "How dare a mere errand-running child to humiliate others like this?" With that, he headed towards the commotion in the east. Quite a lot of people crowded in and around the east hall. Just as Wei Wuxian stepped into the courtyard, a woman spoke in a voice a few pitches louder than the others. "A member from the younger generations of our family used to be a cultivator as well." It must have been Madame Mo trying to make connections with the Cultivation family again. Wei Wuxian didn't wait for her to finish speaking and quickly hustled through the crowd into the hall and grinned, I'm coming, right here." A middle-aged lady sat in the hall with well-maintained health and wearing extravagant clothing. She was Madame Mo. Her husband sat below her, and the opposite side sat a few white-robed boys. Because of how an unkempt freak just appeared from within the people, all of the chatter came to a halt. But Wei Wuxian spoke shamelessly, as if he did not notice the motionless atmosphere at all. "Who was calling for me earlier? I'm the only one who used to be a cultivator." There was too much powder on his face, and as he smiled, the powder sprinkled off. A younger cultivator was on the brink of laughing, letting out a pff sound. His face grew serious again as another one, seemingly the leader of the group, gave him a disapproving look. Wei Wuxian followed the voice and scanned over. He thought that the servants were being ignorant and exaggerated the situation, but he was surprised to see that they were really disciples of a prominent clan. The boys wore robes with drifting sleeves and flowing belts, appearing to be ikemen and doubtlessly a treat to the eyes. Looking at the uniform, it was obvious that they were from the Gusulan clan. They must have also been younger generations of blood relationship to the Lan family, as they all wore white forehead ribbons around a finger's width, which has cloud patterns sewn onto them. The motto of the Gusulan clan was righteousness. The forehead ribbon implied to conduct oneself well, and the cloud pattern was the official pattern of the Lan family, of which cultivators who came from the other families did not have the right to wear. Wei Wuxian got toothaches whenever he saw anybody from the Lan clan. In his past life, he had always thought that this clan's uniform as mourning clothes, which was why he would never mistake it. Lady Mo hadn't seen his nephew of hers in a while, and only got over her dismay after a long time when she realized who the heavily make-upped person was. She was furious, but she didn't want to lose her temper and discompose herself. So she lowered her voice at her husband. "Who let him out? Get him back there." Her husband promptly smiled to calm her and walked over with an irksome look, ready to pull him out of there. However, Wei Wuxian suddenly dropped to the ground, his limbs tightly clinging to the floor. Nobody could get him up, even after some more servants were called to help. As Lady Mo's face darkened bit by bit, her husband was also sweating. He scolded, "You madman! If you don't go back now, wait and see how I'll punish you." Although everyone in the Mo village knew that the Mo family had a young master who lost his marbles, Mo Xuanyu had already hid in that dark room for a couple of years, scared to come outside. After seeing how both his face and actions were like those of monsters, the people whispered among themselves, looking forward to a good show to watch. Wei Wuxian spoke. "I could go back if you want me to." He pointed at Mo Xiyuan. "But tell him to return the things that he stole from me first." Mo Xiyuan did not expect that the good-for-nothing lunatic had the guts to cause trouble here, even after his disciplining yesterday. His face grew pale. "That's nonsense. When did I ever steal your things? Would I need to steal anything from you?" Wei Wuxian said, Yeah, you didn't steal, you robbed." Madame Mo didn't say anything yet, but Mo Xiyuan was furious, raising his foot to kick him. However, a white-robed boy carrying a sword moved his finger slightly, and Mo Xiyuan's feet slipped, falling to the ground with his foot only scraping him. Even so, Wei Wuxian still rolled on the ground as if he was really kicked over, and pulled open the front of his robe, showing the footprint that Mo Xiyuan made yesterday. The others thought that, obviously, Mo Xuanyu couldn't have kicked himself, along with the fact that Mo Yuan had always been imprudent and arrogant, who else could have done it? No matter what, the Mo family had been too ruthless to their own blood relative. It was plain to see that when he first came back, he wasn't this insane, and so it must have been worsened by the people of this family. Nevertheless, all is well as long as there was a good show to watch. This one was much more interesting than the cultivators. Before this, Madame Mo ignored him, as she didn't bother to argue with a sick person. She ordered the others to take him out. Now she knew Mo Xuanyu had definitely come prepared. His head was completely clear and deliberately disgraced them. She felt both shock and hatred. "You made a big scene on purpose, didn't you?" Wei Wuxian replied blankly. "He stole my belongings and I'm here to retrieve them. Does that also count as making a big scene?" With so many pairs of eyes staring, Madame Mo could neither hit him nor throw him out. Anger welled up deep inside her, and she could only forcefully compromise the two sides. "Stealing? Robbing? That's a bit disrespectful if you ask me. We are all part of one family, and he only wanted to take a look at your things. Yuan is your younger brother, so what's wrong with taking a few of your things? As an older brother, you shouldn't be reluctant to lend one or two playthings, should you? It's not as if we won't return them." The boys from the Lan clan stared speechlessly at one another. These young boys grew up in a cultivation clan exposed to splendor, and that only. They'd probably never seen farces like this or even heard of this kind of logic. Wei Wuxian laughed hysterically in his mind and extended his hand. "Then, return them." Of course, it was impossible for Mo Yuan to return anything, having either thrown them out or dissembled them. Even if he was able to return them, his pride wouldn't have allowed it. His face turned purple with anger and he shouted, "Mom!" He glared, raged. "Are you really allowing him to treat me like this?" Lady Mo glowered at him, signaling for him to not worsen the situation. However, Wei Wuxian spoke again. "Not only should he not have stolen my belongings, he shouldn't have stolen them in the middle of the night. Everyone knows that I am into men. Even if he was not ashamed, I need to not look suspicious." Lady Mo gasped and shouted, "What are you talking about in front of the villagers? How shameless! Yuan is your cousin." In terms of running wild, Wei Wuxian was definitely a master. In the past, if he wanted to run wild, he would have to keep his status in mind. But now, he was a lunatic anyways, which meant that he could do whatever he wanted to, whichever way he wanted. He stiffened his neck and argued defiantly. Even though he knew that I was his cousin, he chose not to avoid me. So, who was more shameless? I don't care about your reputation, but don't ruin my innocence. I still want to find a good man." Mo Yuan let out a loud scream and started swinging a chair at him. As soon as Wei Wuxian saw that his anger finally went out of control, he rolled over and climbed up, dodging so that the chair only smashed on the ground, falling apart in the process. The mass of people in the East Hall were originally gloating at the disgrace of the Moore family, but after the fight started, they all fled away. Wei Wuxian bolted towards a group of boys from the Lan clan, who all gaped at the scene and yelled, "Did everyone see that? Did you? The burglar is also beating someone up. How heartless!" Mo Yuan chased him and was close to pouncing on him when the leader of the boys hurriedly stopped him. "Please calm down. Words are more powerful than weapons." Madame Mo saw that the boy was deliberately protecting the lunatic and pulled a smile wearily. "This is my younger sister's son. He's not so bright here. Everyone from the Moore family knows that he is a lunatic and often speaks strange words that shouldn't be taken seriously. Cultivator, please." Before she finished her sentence, Wei Wuxian's head peeked from behind the boy's back and glared. "Who said that my words shouldn't be taken seriously? Next time, try stealing anything from me again. You steal once and I cut off one of your hands." Mo Yuan was originally held down by his father, but after hearing this, he was close to losing his temper again. Wei Wuxian leapt outside quickly, and the boy blocked the entrance at once, switching to another topic with a serious tone. "Then we will borrow the west courtyard for the night. Please remember the things that I've talked about. After nightfall, close all the windows. Don't come outside or worse, work toward the courtyard." Madame Mo was shaking from anger. Yes, please." Mo Yuan found it beyond belief. "Mom, the lunatic insulted me in front of so many people, and that's it? You told me before. You told me that he was only..." Madame Mo commanded, "Be quiet. Can't you wait until we go back?" Mo Yuan had never been at such a disadvantage or been disgraced like this before, with his mother's scolding making the situation worse. He was full of hatred and thought, "This lunatic is going down tonight." After Wei Wuxian finished flipping out, he walked out the door of the Mo family's place and showed his face around the Mo village. Although he surprised countless people, he was in fact loving every second of it, and finally realized the delight of being a lunatic. He was even starting to approve of the makeup that resembled a hanged ghost, almost unwilling to wash it away. He fixed his hair and looked at his wrists. The cuts didn't seem like they were healing at all, which meant that a slight revenge like this would not be approved by the forbidden technique. Would he really have to eliminate the Mo family? To be honest, it wouldn't be too difficult of a task. Wei Wuxian strolled back to the Mo family's west courtyard. The disciples of the Lan clan were standing on top of the roofs and walls, discussing with a solemn look. Although the Gusulan clan contributed greatly during the siege on him, at that time these juniors were either not born yet or still young children. He shouldn't direct his hate towards them. So Wei Wuxian decided to linger around and observe what they were going to do. After a while, he felt like something was wrong. Why did the fluttering black flags on top of the roofs and walls look so familiar to him? This type of flags was called phantom attraction flag. If it was set on a living person, it would attract all of the spirits, wrong ghosts, moving corpses, or evil beings within a certain area so that they would only attack that person. Because the flag-bearing person would be turned into a living target. It was also called the target flag. It could also be set on a house, but the house must have living humans inside of it. Then the attack range would expand to include everyone inside the house. Because of how there would always be a sinister energy that surrounded the area of which the flag was set in, as if there was a swirling black wind. They were also called black wind flags. Arranging the flag formation in the west courtyard and not allowing anyone to approach them must have meant that they wanted to lead the walking corpses here and capture them in one go. As for why they looked familiar, how could they not have come across as familiar? The creator of phantom attraction flags were none other than the Yilim Patriarch. It seems like that, although the cultivation world hated him on the surface, they still used the inventions that he came up with. A disciple standing on the roof saw him lingering around and spoke. "Please go back. This is not where a person like you should come." Although he was being driven away, it was out of kindness, and the tone also differed from those of the servants in the Mo family. Wei Wuxian caught him off guard and quickly hopped up, grabbing one of the flags. The disciple was startled and jumping down to chase him. "Do not move! That is not something you should take!" Wei Wuxian yelled while running away, looking like a real lunatic with his head disheveled and limbs flinging out. "I'm not giving it back! I'm not giving it back! I want this thing! I want this!" The disciple caught up with him in a few strides and grabbed his arm. "If you are not going to give it back, I'm going to hit you." Wei Wuxian held onto the flag, unwilling to let go of it. The leader of the boys was setting up the flag formation and lightly hopped off the roof when he heard of the ruckus. "Xiang, cut it out. Do not make a fuss about it and just take the flag." Lan Xiang spoke. "See, Chui, I did not actually hit him. Look at him messing up the flag formation." During the tug of war, Wei Wuxian had already checked over the phantom attraction flag in his hands. The motifs were drawn correctly and the incantations were complete. There wasn't any errors, so nothing would go wrong while using them. However, the person who drew on the flag was lacking in experience, so it would only attract evil beings and moving corpses from within 2,500 meters. That should be enough though. There shouldn't be any malicious creatures in a place as small as the Mo village. Lan Xishui smiled at him. "Young Master Mo, the sky is growing dark and we are going to start capturing the walking corpses soon. It will be dangerous at night time, so it would be best for you to return your room." Wei Wuxian looked him over. He was fair and refined, with a dignified appearance and smiling faintly. Wei Wuxian silently approved of him. The flag formation was set in an organized way, and his mannerisms were also respectful, making him a disciple with astonishing potential. He didn't know that at a conservative clan, such as the Lan clan, who on earth brought up such a junior? Lan Xishui spoke again. "This flag..." Before he finished, Wei Wuxian threw the phantom attraction flag onto the ground and It's just a flag. So, what's the big deal? I can draw way better than this. He sprinted off the moment he threw the flag away. The boys who stood on the roof to watch the bustle almost fell off from the laughter after hearing his ridiculous words. Lan Jiangyi also chuckled from anger and picked up the phantom attraction flag. What a maniac! Wei Wuxian continued to roam around, doing nothing, and finally moved back to the small courtyard that belonged to Mo Xuanyu. He ignored the broken bowl and the mess on the ground, picked a relatively clean spot and sat in the lotus position again. However, before daylight came, he was pulled out of meditation by some noise from the outside. A series of chaotic footsteps quickly approached, along with cries and screams. Wei Wuxian heard a few phrases being repeated. Barge in and drag him out. Notify the officers. What do you mean notify the officers? Beat him to death. He opened his eyes to see that a few servants had already came in. The whole courtyard was set alight with fire. Someone cried out, "Drag the insane murderer to the main hall and make him pay for it with his life." Wei Wuxian's first thought was that something went wrong with the flag formation that the boys set up. His inventions needed to be used extremely carefully, or else disasters could happen. This was also why he went to check if there was anything wrong with the motifs that were drawn. As a few pairs of big hands came to drag him outside, Wei Wuxian straightened his body and allowed them to do so without difficulty so that he wouldn't have to walk by himself. The East Hall was bustling with people, almost more crowded than when the villagers of Mo village gathered here. All of the servants and relatives were present. Some were still in their undergarments and didn't yet have the time to brush their hair, but everyone looked terrified. Madame Mo was collapsed in her seat as if she just woke up from a swoon. The streaks of tears could be seen on her cheeks, and tears still lingered in her eyes. But as Wei Wuxian was dragged inside, her sorrowful gaze immediately became hateful. A human-shaped object lay on the ground with its body covered by a white cloth and only the head being revealed. Lang Shichui and the other boys wore heavy expressions, bending down to check the situation and talking in soft voices. The conversation leaked into Wei Wuxian's ears. Less than 3 minutes have passed since the body was discovered. After subduing walking corpse, we hurried from the west courtyard to the east courtyard and found the corpse by the hallway. The human-shaped thing was apparently Mo Xiyuan. Wei Wuxian took one glance at it and couldn't help but to look again. The corpse looked like Mo Xiyuan in some ways, but unlike him in other ways. Although the features were clearly that of his petty cousins, the cheekbones were deeply sunken, eyes bulging, and skin wrinkled. Compared to the youthful Mo Xiyuan before this, it was as if he aged 20 years. It also seemed like his blood and flesh were sucked out of him, turning him into a skeleton with only a thin layer of skin on the outside. If before this Mo Xiyuan was just ugly, now his corpse was both old and ugly. As Wei Wuxian was scrutinizing the corpse, Madame Mo suddenly rushed toward him, with a gleaming dagger in her hand. Being light in his feet, Lan Chui quickly knocked the dagger off. Before he had a chance to talk, Madame Mo shrieked at him, "My son died a tragic death, so I am only avenging him. What are you stopping me for?" Wei Wuxian hid behind Lan Chui's back again and spoke while squatting. "How does your son's tragic death concern me?" During the day, Lan Chui saw Wei Wuxian make a scene in the East Hall, and afterwards he also heard a lot of exaggerated rumors from other people. He felt extremely sympathetic to the invalid and couldn't help but to take his side. "Madame Mo, seeing from your son's condition, his flesh and essence have been drawn out of him, which means that he was killed by evil beings, not by him." Madame Mo's chest heaved. "You know nothing. The lunatic's father was a cultivator. He must have learned a lot of demonic spells from him." Lan Chui turned around to look at the seemingly dull-witted Wei Wuxian and spoke again. "Madam, there is a lack of evidence, so—" "The evidence is on my son!" Madame Mo pointed at the corpse on the ground. "Look for yourselves. Yuan's remains already told me who murdered him." Not needing other people to do it, Wei Wuxian lifted the white cloth by himself from the head down to the feet. There was something missing on Mo Xiyuan's dead body. His left arm, severed from below his shoulder, had disappeared. Madame Mo spoke. "Do you see this? Everyone who were here heard that the lunatic said right. He said that if Yuan touched his belongings again, he would cut off his hand." After the burst of emotion, she covered her face and sobbed. "My poor Yuan, although he didn't do anything to him at all, he was not only framed but also killed as well. The lunatic is out of his mind." "Out of his mind?" It has been a few years since he last heard the phrase being used to describe him, so it was quite cordial. Wei Wuxian pointed at himself, but no words came to him. He didn't know if he was the ill one or if it was Madame Mo. When he was younger, he talked quite a lot about exterminating entire families and clans, killing millions of people, creating rivers of blood and other cruel actions, but most of the time they were empty words. If he could actually do the things that he said, he would have long been dominating the cultivation world. Madame Mo's true intention wasn't to avenge for him, but to find someone to let out her resentment on. Wei Wuxian didn't want to be bothered with her. He thought for a moment and stuck his hand into Mo Xiyuan's arms. He fished around for a moment and pulled something out, unfolding it in front of him. Surprisingly, it was a phantom attraction flag. Instantly, he realized what was going on and uttered under his breath, "He had it coming." When Lan Chui and the others saw what was taken out of Mo Xiyuan's arms, they also understood the situation. Associating this with the fast that happened today, the cause was easy to guess. During the day, Mo Xiyuan lost face because Mo Xuanyu's crazy behavior and loathed him, still wanting to square up with him. However, Mo Xuanyu wandered outside for a long while, so Mo Xiyuan planned to sneak up on him at night when he would be returning. When night had fallen, he secretly went outside and was passing the west courtyard when he saw the phantom attraction flags on the walls. Although he was repeatedly told not to go outside or near the western courtyard at night, and especially to stay away from these black flags, Mo Xiang thought that he was told to do so because they were scared of people stealing the valuable weapons. He had no idea about the dangerous effects of these phantom attraction flags, or that if he held it, he would be turned into a living target. He got addicted to stealing his cousin's talismans and magic tools, and he would always itch to take odd items like this, not giving up until he obtained it. Therefore, when the owners of the flags were subduing walking corpses in the west courtyard, he quietly took one. The flag formation utilized 6 flags, of which 5 were set in the west courtyard with the boys from the Lan family as baits. However, they were all carrying countless magic tools on them, and although Mo Xiang only took a single flag, he didn't have any magic tools for protection on him. It was common sense to pick on the weak, so the evil beings would naturally be attracted to him. If there were only walking corpses, then it wouldn't matter too much. Even he was bitten, he wouldn't die immediately and could still be saved. Unfortunately, the phantom attraction flag accidentally attracted something worse than a walking corpse. The unknown being was what killed Mo Xiang and took his arm. Wei Wuxian raised his wrist. Sure enough, one of the cuts on his right hand had healed. It looked like that he had scored a lucky hit. The sacrificial contract had already deemed the death of Mo Xiang as his doing. Madame Mo as well aware of her son's foibles, but she wasn't willing to admit that Mo Xiang caused his own death. Due to impatience and rage, she grabbed a teacup and threw it in the direction of Wei Wuxian's head. If you hadn't framed him in front of so many people yesterday, would he go out in the middle of the night? It's all your fault, you son of a bitch. Wei Wuxian saw it coming and dodged to the side. Madame Mo turned to Lan Zichui and screeched, "And you bunch of useless fools! You cultivate and ward off evil spirits, but you can't even protect him. Are you still a child?" The boys were still young. They hadn't been outside much and were too inexperienced to find anything wrong with the area, which was why they felt sorry for not detecting an evil being as fierce as this one. Nonetheless, after Madame Mo's senseless scolding, they all looked blue in the face. After all, they grew up in a prominent family, so nobody dared to treat him like this. The Gusolan clan was extremely strict to its disciples, forbidding violence against the powerless everyman, not even allowing disrespect. Therefore, even if they felt displeased, they had to keep everything down with dark expressions. However, Wei Wuxian couldn't stand it any longer and thought, "It has been so many years, but the Lan clan's values are still the same. What's the use of their so-called self-restraint? Watch me do this the right way." He spat loudly and spoke. "Who do you think you are taking out your anger on? Did you really say them as your servants? They travelled far and wide to come here and exorcise evil spirits for you without taking a penny. Do they owe you anything? How old is your son? He should be at least 17. And so, how is he still a child? How young of a child does he have to be not to understand basic human language? Did they or did they not repeatedly instruct him not to touch anything in the formation and not approach the west courtyard? Your son sneaks outside at night on his own. Is it my fault or is it his fault? Lan Jiangyi and the others let out a breath of air, faces not so dark anymore. Madame Mo was both extremely mournful and resentful, and all she could think about was the word death. Not her own death so that she could be with her son, but the deaths of everyone in the world, especially the ones in front of her right now. She had a habit of ordering her husband to do everything, and so she knocked him. Call everyone inside. Even so, her husband was in a trance, possibly because of the trauma from his only child passing away. He went as far as to backhandedly push her. It caught Madame Mo by surprise and she fell onto the ground. In the past, Madame Mo didn't even need to push him. If she just raised her voice, he would comply immediately. How could he dare to strike back today? The servants were all scared out of their wits from her expression. Xiang helped her up while quivering. Madame Mo clutched her chest and spoke in a trembling voice. You get out of here as well. Her husband seemed like he didn't hear anything. Xiang gave a few looks to Tong, and Tong hurriedly helped his master to walk outside. The East Hall was in chaos. As Wei Wuxian saw that the family had finally silenced, he intended to examine the corpse again. However, before he took another look at it, another high-pitched scream pierced through the air. It was from the courtyard. The people in the hall all rushed outside. On the ground of the east courtyard, there were two twitching bodies. The first was that of Tong, still alive, collapsed on the ground. The other fallen body was wrinkled and withered as if the blood and the flesh had been emptied dry. The left arm was already gone, but no blood came out of the wound. The condition of the corpse was the same as Mo Xiyuan's. Madame Mo brushed off Xiang's supporting hand a second ago, but as she saw the corpse on the ground, her eyes widened, and she finally out of energy to throw another fit. As she fainted, Wei Wuxian happened to be next to her and gave her a hand, passing her to Xiang, who came running. He looked at his right hand to see that another one of the cuts was also gone. It was merely a few seconds before they walked over the threshold of the hall, not even past the east courtyard yet, and saw Madame Mo's husband die distressingly. Lan Xichui, Lan Jiangyi, and the others also grew pale in the face. Lan Xichui was the first to calm down and ask Tong, who lay on the ground, "Did you see what it was?" Tong was almost scared to death, unable to open his mouth. Even after a few moments of asking, Tong still couldn't answer and only shook his head repeatedly. Lan Xichui was burning with anxiety. He asked another disciple to take him back inside and turned to Lan Jiangyi. "Did you send the signal?" Lan Jiangyi answered, "I did, But if there are no seniors who can assist us in the area, it would take at least an hour for our people to come here. What should we do now? We don't even know what it was. Of course, it would be impossible for them to leave. If the disciples of a clan only cared about their own well-being when facing evil spirits, it would not only be bringing disgrace upon the clan, they themselves would also be ashamed to face others. The frightened people of the Moore family couldn't go either, because it was likely that the evil being was among them. So nothing would be gained from going away. Lan Chui gritted his teeth. Wait here for the reinforcements. Now that the signal for help had been sent, other cultivators would come to aid them within a short period of time. To prevent things from getting out of hand, Wei Wuxian should withdraw and keep away from the situation. If the persons who came happened to know him or fought with him before, it would be hard to say that what was going to happen next. However, with the curse, he couldn't leave Moore village anytime soon. In addition, the being that was attracted here had taken the lives of 2 people within such a short amount of time, which means that it must have been extremely vicious. If Wei Wuxian left now, when the helpers came, the streets of Moore village might be packed with corpses who lost their left arms, including a few disciples of blood relations to the Gusu Lan clan as well. After pondering for a moment, Wei Wuxian told himself, "Finish it quickly." The boys on the side were all young and inexperienced. However, although they all looked nervous, they strictly stuck to their positions and protected the Moore family's house, fixing talismans onto the walls. The servant named Tong was already carried into the hall. Lan Chui felt his pulse with his left hand and supported Madame Moore's back with his right. He couldn't save both of them at once and was in a terrible fix when Tong crawled up from the ground. Jiang exclaimed, "Tong, you're awake!" Before her face had the time to light up, Tong raised his left hand and clutched his own neck. Seeing this, Lan Chui tapped on a few of his acupoints for 3 times. Wei Wuxian knew that, although they looked gentle, the people from the Lan clan had arm strength that were the opposite of gentle. With a force like this, it would be hard for anyone to move. However, Tong seemed like he didn't feel anything, and his left hand's grip tightened and his expressions looking more painful and twisted. Lan Jiangyi proceeded to grab his left hand, but it was like breaking off a chunk of iron, having no effect at all. After a moment, a crack came from his neck, and Tong's head drooped down. His neck was already broken. He actually strangled himself in front of everyone's eyes. Seeing the situation, Jiang's voice wavered. "A ghost! There's an invisible ghost here! It made Tong strangle himself!" Her tone was sharp and her voice was shrill, making everyone's blood run cold. And so they believed it effortlessly. Wei Wuxian's judgment happened to be the opposite. It wasn't a ferocious ghost. He had examined the talismans that the boys chose. All of them were spirit-fending ones, and the east hall was literally covered with them. If it really was a ferocious ghost, then as it went into the east hall, the talismans would have incinerated green flames. Yet nothing was happening right now. It was not the group of kids' fault for reacting too slow, but the creature was indeed cruel. The cultivation world has a strict definition for the category of ferocious ghosts. They had to kill at least one person a month and continue the behavior for at least 3 months. The criteria was set by Wei Wuxian himself, and it was probably still being used. He was the best at dealing with this kind. To him, killing one person in 7 days would be considered as a ferocious ghost who killed frequently. This thing killed 3 people at once, and within such a short period of time. It would be hard for even a capable cultivator to think of a solution immediately, let alone these juniors who had just started their careers. As he was thinking, the candlelight flickered. A sinister wind passed, and all of the lanterns and candles in the courtyard and the east hall died out. The moment the lights were extinguished, screams came from everywhere. Everyone pushed and pulled, wanting to escape as fast as they could, stumbling and failing in the process. Lan Xiang shouted, "Stay where you are and don't run! I'm gonna catch whoever runs!" It wasn't merely saying this to alarm the people. In fact, evil beings love to cause trouble in the dark and make profits in times of trouble. The worse the crying and chaos, the more likely it was to unknowingly attract danger. At times like this, being isolated or becoming nervous was extremely unsafe. However, everyone was frightened to death. So how could they still have ears for words like this? After a while, the east hall grew quiet, with only a few light breaths and faint sobs. It was likely that only a few people were left. Amidst the dark, a fire lit up suddenly. Lan Zichui ignited a flame talisman. The fire from the flame talisman would not be extinguished by sinister winds. He used the talisman to light up the candle again, and the rest of the boys went to comfort the others. Under the light, Wei Wuxian casually looked at his wrists. Another cut had healed. After looking, he suddenly realized that there was something wrong about the number of cuts. Originally, he had 2 cuts on each of his wrists. One healed when Mo Xiyuan died, and another healed when Mo Xiyuan's father died. The death of the servant Tong healed one more of the cuts. Adding it up, only 3 cuts should have healed, with the last cut being the deepest and most hate-filled one. Right now, no cuts remain on his wrists. Wei Wuxian knew that Madame Mu was definitely one of Mo Xuanyu's targets of vengeance. The longest and deepest cut was probably saved for her, yet it had disappeared. Did Mo Xuanyu suddenly reach a point of epiphany and let go of his hate? That'd be impossible. His soul had already been sacrificed as the price for summoning Wei Wuxian. Only the death of Madame Mo could heal the wound. His gaze slowly moved towards the pale-faced Madame Mo, who recently woke up and was surrounded by everyone. Unless she was already dead. Wei Wuxian was sure that something was already possessing Madame Mo's body. If the being wasn't a spirit, Then what was it? Suddenly, Xiang cried, "Hand! His hand! Tong's hand!" Lan Shui moved the flame talisman above Tong's body. Sure enough, his left hand has disappeared as well. Left hand! With lightning speed, Wei Wuxian's mind became clear. With the being that was wreaking havoc and the missing left arms finally completing the puzzle, he promptly burst out laughing. Lan Xiang snapped, "You idiot! How can you still laugh in a situation like this?" But after a second thought, he knew that he was an idiot anyways. So, what's the use of haggling over him? Wei Wuxian tugged at his sleeve. "No, no!" Lan Xiang was annoyed, pulling his sleeve back. "What no? You're not an idiot. Stop fooling around. Nobody has the time to pay attention to you." Wei Wuxian pointed at the corpse of Mo Xiyuan's father and Tong, which lay on the ground, and spoke. "These are not them." Lan Shui stopped the fuming Lan Xiang and asked, "What do you mean, these are not them?" Wei Wuxian stated solemnly, "This is not Mo Xiyuan's dad, and this is not Tong either." With his makeup-covered face, the more solemn he looked, the more he seemed like an actual lunatic. Yet, surrounded by the dim candlelight, his words sent chills up everyone's back. Lan Shui stared for a second and asked in spite of himself, "Why?" Wei Wuxian exclaimed proudly, "Their hands! None of them was left-handed. I'm sure of this because they'd always hit me with their right hands." Lan Xiang spat, running out of patience. "What are you being proud of for? Look at how complacent you are." However, Lan Shui broke into a sweat. Thinking back, Tong had used his left hand to strangle himself, and Madame Mo's husband also used his left hand to push his wife. But during the day, when Mo Xuanyu was causing trouble in the East Hall, the two were rushing to get him out of there, both using their right hands. It was impossible for them to suddenly turn left-handed before they died. Although he didn't know why, in order to figure out what the creature was, they had to think in the direction of left hands. After Lan Shui realized this, he felt surprised and looked at Wei Wuxian. He couldn't help but to think, suddenly saying this, it doesn't seem like a coincidence. Wei Wuxian only smiled. He knew that the hint was too deliberate, but he couldn't have helped it. The good thing was that Lan Shui didn't think too much about it either, and thought, anyways, if young Master Mo was willing to remind me of it, he probably didn't mean any harm. His eyes moved away from him, passing Xiang, and who fainted from crying too much, and landed on Madame Mo. His gaze traveled from her face down to her hands. Her arms were hanging down and were mostly hidden inside her sleeves, with only half of the fingers showing. Her right hand had fair, thin fingers, undoubtedly those of a woman who lived comfortably and never worked. However, the fingers on her left hand were much longer than the ones on her right. They were also thicker. The knuckles were bent, full of power. The hand isn't that of a woman's. It was a man's hand. Lan Chui commanded. "Take hold of her!" A few boys grabbed Madame Mo. Lan Chui said, "Excuse me," and was prepared to slap down a talisman when Madame Mo's left hand suddenly twisted in an absurd way, aiming for his throat. Unless one's bone had been broken, it was impossible for a living person to twist their arm like this. She attacked quickly and was extremely close to grabbing onto his neck, when at the same time Lan Jiangyi shouted, "Hey!" and threw himself in front of Lan Chui, blocking the hand for him. A flash passed, and as soon as the arm grabbed Lan Jiangyi's shoulder, green flames ignited on his arm, making it loosen its grip. Lan Chui escaped death and was about to thank Lan Jiangyi for it when he saw that half of the latter's uniform had already been burned to ashes, looking quite awkward. Lan Jiangyi took off the other half of his uniform and scolded, fuming with rage. "Why did you kick me, you lunatic? Did you want to kill me?" Wei Wuxian scampered away like a frightened rat. "It wasn't me!" It was him. Inside of the Lan clan's uniform jacket, there were compact stitchings of incantations using thin threads of the same color included for protection. However, against strong ones like this, it could only be used once before it became invalid. During the emergency, he could only kick Lan Jiangyi and use his body to protect Lan Zichui's neck. Lan Jiangyi wanted to scold him again, but Madame Mo fell onto the ground, with all of the blood and flesh on her face being drained until only a thin layer of skin was left on the skull. The male arm that didn't belong to her had fallen off her shoulders. Its fingers bent freely, as if it was stretching or exercising, and the throbs of its veins were clearly visible. This was the evil being that the phantom attraction flag had attracted. Being dismembered was a classic example of a distressing death. It was only somewhat more dignified than the way Wei Wuxian died. Unlike the situation of being crushed to powders, the limbs and parts of the corpse would be tainted with some of the resentment of the person who died, and it would want to reunite with the other parts and die with a whole corpse. Therefore, it would come up with strategies to find the other parts of the body. If it found it, it might be satisfied and rest in peace, or it might stir up more trouble. If it couldn't find it, the body part would have to put up with the second best option. What would be the second best option be? It would have to make do with the bodies of living humans. It was like this left hand. Eat the left hand of a living person and replace it. After draining all of the person's blood and energy, it would abandon the body and find another container for parasitism, until it finally collected all of the other parts of its corpse. As soon as the arm had possessed a person, they would die immediately. But before all of the flesh had been eaten, they would still be able to walk around under its control, as if the person was still alive. After it was attracted, the first container that it found was Mo Xiyuan. The second one was Mo Xiyuan's father. When Madame Mo told her husband to go away, he acted out of the norm and pushed her. Wei Wuxian originally thought that it was because he was grieving his son's death and also tried his wife's arrogance. Now that he thought about it again, it wasn't what a father who would just lost his son should look like. It wasn't the indifference from feeling hopeless. It was a deadly tranquility, the tranquility coming from an already deceased person. The third container was Tong, and the fourth one was Madame Mo. During the chaos from when the lights suddenly went out, the ghost hand had transferred onto her body. When Madame Mo died, the last cut on Wei Wuxian's wrist also disappeared. The boys from the Lan clan saw that, although talismans didn't work, clothing did, and all took off their coats to cover the left hand. The layers of clothing looked like white cocoon. After a second, the ball of white cloth ignited with a whoosh, creating a green abnormal inferno. Although it would take care of the moment, after a while, when the uniforms were completely burned, the hand would emerge from within the ashes. While nobody was looking, Wei Wuxian ran towards the west courtyard. The 10 or so walking corpses that were subdued by the boys stood silently in the courtyard, sealed by the incantations drawn on the ground. Wei Wuxian kicked one of the symbols, destroying the entire formation. He clapped twice. Suddenly, with a jolt, the whites of the walking corpses' eyes all turned upward, as if they were woken up by a bolt of thunder. Wei Wuxian spoke. "Wake up! It's time to work!" He usually didn't need complex incantations to control these corpse puppets. A straightforward command would do as well. The walking corpses in front of him moved a few quivering steps, but as they approached Wei Wuxian, their legs grew weak and they collapsed onto the ground, as if they were real humans. Wei Wuxian found it both funny and annoying. He clapped his hands again, this time lighter. However, these walking corpses were probably born in Mo village and died here as well, not having experienced life fully. They instinctively followed the summoner's commands, but were also horrified at the summoner, lying on the ground and afraid to get up. The crueler the being was, the better Wei Wuxian could control it. These walking corpses hadn't been trained by him and couldn't withstand direct manipulations from him. He didn't have any materials on him, which means that he could immediately make tools to ease the walking corpses. He couldn't even muddle and assemble bits and pieces. The soaring green flames in the east courtyard gradually grew dimmer. Suddenly, Wei Wuxian found a solution. Why would he need to come outside and find a dead person with strong resentment and cruel personality? There were not only one, but multiple corpses in the east hall. He ran back to the east courtyard. As Lan Zichui first solution failed, he found a second one. The disciples pulled out their swords and stuck them into the ground, making a sword fence. The ghost hand crashed into the fence, and they spent all their energy compressing their hilts so that it didn't break out. Paying no attention to who was entering and leaving, Wei Wuxian strode into the east hall and grabbed Madame Mo and Mo Xiyuan's corpses, one on each hand, and spoke in a low voice, "Wake up." In a split second, Madame Mo and Mo Siyuan's eye whites turned up and started making the shrill and powerful shrieks that ferocious ghosts made after they came back to life. Amidst and shrieks, another corpse trembled and crawled up, making the lowest and faintest shriek. It was Madame Mo's husband. The shrieks were loud enough, and the resentment was strong enough. Wei Wuxian smiled, feeling quite satisfied. "Do you recognize the hand outside?" he commanded. "Tear it apart." The 3 members of the Mo family whipped out like 3 clouds of black wind. The left arm fractured one of the swords and was about to break out when 3 cruel corpses without left arms came at it. Aside from being unable to defy Wei Wuxian's command, the family also loathed the creature that killed them and let out their anger on the ghost hand. The main attacker was undoubtedly Madame Mo, because female corpses were often specially fierce after they were modified. Her hair was loose and her eyes were bloodshot, with nails that multiplied in length, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth, and shrieks that were enough to uplift the ceiling. She looked extremely insane. Behind her followed Mo Siyuan, who cooperated with her and used both his teeth and his hands. His father was at the end, covering for the gaps between the attacks of the other 2 corpses. The struggling boys were stricken dumb with amazement. They had only seen these battles between multiple fierce corpses in books and hearsay, and they all gaped as they saw the gore-splattered scene for the first time, unable to avert their gazes. They all thought that it was absolutely thrilling. The 3 corpses and the hand were in the middle of a tough battle when Mo Siyuan abruptly moved out of the way. His abdomen area was attacked by the hand, causing a few chunks of his intestine to spill out. As Madame Mo saw this, she screamed incessantly and shielded her son behind herself. Her attacks were more violent, the strength of her fingers almost comparable to that of steel and iron weapons. But Wei Wuxian knew that she was gradually being overpowered. Even 3 cruel corpses who recently died couldn't subdue the single arm. Wei Wuxian was watching the battle attentively. His tongue was slightly curled, suppressing a sharp whistle inside of his lips, preparing it to be let out. The whistle would be able to evoke even more hostility in the cruel corpses, which might turn the tables. Then, however, it would be difficult to ensure that nobody knew that it was his doing. In the blink of an eye, the hand moved like lightning, ruthlessly and precisely breaking Madame Mo's neck. Watching as the Mo family grew closer to defeat, Wei Wuxian prepared to blow the whistle that he suppressed under his tongue. At the same time, the echoes of 2 strums on a stringed instrument came from afar away. The sound seems to have been played by a human. The timbre was ethereal and clear, carrying the bleak chills of wind-swept pines. The creature's battling in the courtyard all stiffened as they heard the sound. Instantaneously, the boys from the Gusulan clan started beaming as if they were born again. Lan Chui wiped the blood off of his face and raised his head, happily exclaiming, "Hanguanjun!" As soon as he heard the two faraway strums of the sitar, Wei Wuxian turned around and began to leave. The sound of another strum came. This time the pitch was lighter, piercing through the sky with a few degrees of bitterness. The three cruel corpses backed off and covered one ear with their right hands. However, it was impossible to block out of the eradication tone of the Gusulan clan by means such as this. They had just retreated a few steps and slight bursting sounds came from within their skulls. Because the arm had just endured a tough fight, after hearing a sound of the strings again, it instantly fell onto the ground. Although the fingers were still flinching, the arm was unable to move. After a short moment of silence, the boys couldn't help but to cheer loudly, celebrating the joy of surviving the incident. They had struggled through the exhilarating night, and their clan's reinforcement had finally come. Even if they'd be punished because of reasons such as being discourteous and making noise is harmful to the clan's reputation, they didn't care. After waving towards the moon, Lan Chui suddenly realized that someone had disappeared. He tugged Lan Jiangyi. "Where is he?" Lan Jiangyi was absorbed in the act of rejoicing. "Who? Which one?" Lan Chui replied, "Young Master Mo." Lan Jiangyi said, "Why are you looking for that lunatic? Who knows where he ran off to? He's probably frightened by my threats to hit him." Lan Chui knew that Lan Jiangyi had always been careless and straightforward, not thinking twice about anything or suspecting anyone. He thought, "I'll wait for Han Guanjun to come and then tell him about everything." Mo village was still asleep, but it was difficult to tell whether it was a real slumber or a faked one. Although the corpse fight was a mass of blood and gore, the villagers didn't wake up during the early morning to watch. After all, even bystanders needed to choose which events to show up at. One that involved lots of screaming was definitely not the safest type. Wei Wuxian eliminated all evidence of the sacrificial formation in Mo Xuanyu's room as fast as he could and ran out of the door. Unfortunately, the person who came happened to be from the Lan clan, but even more unfortunately, he happened to be Lan Wangji. This was one of the people who had fought with him before, so he should retreat quickly. He was in a hurry to find a mount as he passed a courtyard and saw a big milestone inside. A donkey was tied to the handle, chewing on his mouth. When it saw him run over rashly, it seemed like it was surprised and eyed him sideways as if it was a real person. Wei Wuxian made eye contact with him for 1 second and was immediately touched by the minuscule amount of contempt on its eyes. He tried to grab onto the rope and pull it out, but the donkey complained by making a few loud noises. Therefore, Wei Wuxian had to use both his words and his strength to deceive it and get it onto the road. As dawn came over the horizon, they went off onto the main path.